Hello, hello. How we doing? I'm the lesser known Dougal Fleming from the University of Brighton.
You are up there.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's a treat to have you here, Rupert. And essentially, what I'd really love for you to feel is supported by all of these people who are deeply invested and engaged in this topic, because you are the man. You hold quite a lot of power in this area for these sorts of things to happen. And it'd be really great if we could, all I want to do is get everyone to make a pledge, even if it's just to yourself, after this conversation, to do something to support this man in what he's up to. And so if you could inspire these people to kind of come up with these pledges, that's what I'd love to do. So maybe share top 3 priorities or speak to the topic that we have here today.
Dougal, thank you, and thanks for shifting the order around. Much appreciated. I mean, it's great to come here and listen to some of the debate. I think we're really lucky in East Sussex. We've got some fantastic landscape, high wealds, the Southlands National Park, lots of protected areas, fantastic coastline. I mean, this building itself, and just having Turner Prize here just illustrates how important East Sussex is, how important Eastbourne is, and these facilities are great. I think when we talk about transport, I mean it really is an enabler. It facilitates so many things, and quite often I think about what do people want? They want a roof over their head, they want access to employment and jobs, they want access to healthcare, access to education, access to green spaces. And part of my job and part of the job of the county council is to try as best we possibly can to make that happen. And I know you would have heard from Lisa and possibly John earlier on about the local transport plan, which I think there's some quite exciting stuff in there. And I think how we move from focusing on some of the historic aspects to focusing on people and place, it's pretty fundamental to the development of the local transport plan. And I think, I course a couple of presentations where I talk about integrated transport. How do you integrate those modes? How do you integrate rail and bus and active travel? I think is key. There's some really fascinating stats out there. If you think about, mode share for rail, nationally it's about 2%. In the southeast, we're slightly more blessed. There's a 4% mode share. But most people are using those corridors that we call roads to get about, whether that be by car, by cycling, by bus. And today's announcement by government about additional funding for highways maintenance, for roads maintenance, whatever you might think, you can't get away from the fact that those corridors are really, really important for getting around, particularly in rural areas. I'm really proud of the team for what they secured with the bus service investment plan, improvement plan funding, £41 million to bus improvements. I think that puts us about sort of third, I think, in the country for bus improvements. So that's a really exciting area. I don't know whether it was Joel, I couldn't see at the back, but someone talking about some of the challenges of putting in bus priority measures. I think he mentioned Seaside as an example. There are mixed views on these things, and part of our job, and frankly, this is where sort of back to your question, where you come in, is taking people with us on that journey. No pun intended, but if you're putting in bus priority measures, you're going to have mixed views, and so that your work in encouraging communities, helping communities understand how things like bus priority measures can be helpful, can support them, can provide those wider transport choices, I think is key. The other thing I would mention, it would be remiss of me not to, is that local authorities only have a finite amount of funding available, and the pressures for local authorities at the moment are quite legendary. You would have heard yourselves, many authorities finding it very difficult to balance the books, and we have to play off all the place-based stuff that we deal with, so that whether that's disposing of waste or putting transport connectivity in, or providing a library service, against some of the pressures that we face in children's social care and adult social care. One of the roles of a local authority is to try and look after the most vulnerable in our society. And so there is a bit of a balancing act. We'd all like to see many of the things that you've described today, but there is only a finite amount of money available, and there's only so much you can put on a credit card to fund some of those things. But I suppose what is key for me is where we want to introduce measures that are going to improve transport choices. It's how do we get the community and the people who it's going to affect coming.
Yeah, there's been some great presentations on the buses already today, and living in Ringmer and working at Brighton University, I have started to use buses more than ever. And I think actually I'm not a particularly cleanly person, but cleanliness of the buses is a really important thing to kind of get people on, making it cheap, making it clean, as Norman Baker mentioned earlier. I want to do a quick fire round, okay? Because you're very good at talking, but let's just get some. Let's meet Rupert a bit more. So, so quick fire questions you can answer sort of within 10 seconds, if you like. Do you agree with fewer cars on our roads?
I think, yeah, ideally we want more modal shift, better transport choices, people getting on buses, getting on trains, more use of active travel. What's not to like in terms of the health benefits and all the rest.
Good man. What is the biggest transport challenge you face?
I would say long-term funding.
Long-term. Let's try to get some long-term funding then for our area. What is your favourite road in Sussex? This is us bonding. We're becoming friends here. He's going to tell me it's something like up at Crowlink Lane or something like that. I don't want to feed you an answer.
I think when you think about your favourite road in Sussex, for me, it's about the landscape and the environment that it sits in. So there's some amazing, links across places like the Ashdown Forest. That road up from Jevington, up to the top above Friston, is amazing. But yeah, well, of course, I wasn't going to fall into the trap when you come down from Seaford and you can see the meanders. And
what he means to say is Woodingdean up over the Amex. But yeah, good answer. Do you think that towns should pedestrianise its central shopping road in general?
I mean, if you look at Eastbourne Town Centre, there's been quite a lot of investment to go in there to try and bring about more of a shared space feel. It's not without its difficulties because, again, people have various different opinions. You've got to consider access, people who might be visually impaired. There is some merit in taking vehicles away from those, that town centre. But, in doing so, you don't want to push them elsewhere. So you have to, it's not just about focusing on the town centre. You've got to look wider.
Yes or no?
How do you get people into the town centre? You don't want suddenly all your streets clogged up with
Sure, but in general, what do you think? Yes or no? Which way do you lean?
In general, it's a more pleasurable experience, isn't it?
Good man. Cliff High Street is absolutely thriving as a result of pedestrianisation, and that was like a band-aid that you had to rip off. A lot of, and I consider myself a local trader on that street, had to, contend with. Brighton as well is absolutely thriving, as Julia made earlier. Do you think big infrastructure projects are key to decarbonising our transport policies? Transport sector?
I think they are, big infrastructure projects are important, yes, because in some instances that might facilitate better quality of life, more access to active travel. I can think of a few examples across the region where there are parts of the strategic road network that split towns, split communities, create air quality issues, blocks to transport choice and active travel movements. And some of those things can only be solved by, larger infrastructure. We talk about getting people out of the cars, which is absolutely right, but you've got to be able to provide reliable transport choices to enable people to make that jump. You then get into the debate. I'm talking a bit here.
Yeah, that's
all right. You then get into a debate about, how do you incentivize people to get out of the car, for example? One is providing adequate transport choices. The other is, and if you look at the cost of motoring by comparison to rail and bus use over the last decade, it is disproportionately more expensive to get a bus and get a train than it is to drop in your car. And if you think about electric vehicles, well, Treasury at some point will lose potentially about 30 billion quid in tax receipt because everybody's EV charging. And bearing in mind EV charging in your house, you don't pay that to the same extent as you would if you charge it on street. How do you plug 30 billion quid? Treasury are going to want to plug it somehow, aren't they? Well, does that lend yourself to an opportunity to consider, future taxation regime around motorists? And then you move into, does that lead you to, frankly, a road user charging type model
Yeah.
that gives Treasury the cash back. You generate a surplus that you invest in public transport investments, for example.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. Make motoring more expensive to get less cars on the roads. It's essentially what I think you said, isn't it?
Well, I said
No, it's all right.
you've got to
last question then is, so again, Norman Baker asked us to imagine our transport system schemes or introduce imagination into these schemes. And I'm an innovation advisor at the University of Brighton, so Clean Growth UK, we help businesses to think up new ways of transporting and various other things. And so this is very much my sort of area of passion and love. But what does innovation in this space look like to you and your role, and potentially then mix that in with a pledge to us here today, if you can?
So I think digital infrastructure is going to be important in the transport world of the future. We saw in the government's thinking more about sort of connected and autonomous vehicles. And of course, to make that work, you need the digital infrastructure, be that 5G or other. So I think that is quite an important.
Is that possible here, autonomous vehicles in the southeast?
Yeah, I think if you've got the right digital infrastructure, there's no reason why you couldn't make it work. I mean, I think there's a number of embryonic schemes that are operating in various places around the world, but it does rely on that digital infrastructure. I think how you decarbonise transport is quite challenging. As I just mentioned, looking in terms of mode shift on rail, 4% mode share rather in rail. Everybody uses those corridors to some degree or another. I think innovation in materials as well. So thinking about how you can decarbonise from a materials perspective. But I think the big one is around, for me at the moment, if I played this out sort of in 30 years horizon, then that digital AI, how does that play into transport?
Perpetual data collection is a really key part.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was mentioned in the transport scheme earlier, how there's a sort of data scoping section, isn't there? Whereas if we're perpetually collecting data, then we can have sort of live improvements and adjustments, because it is a bit of a travesty how many people get seriously hurt and injured on our roads and obviously die as well. And I was looking into some figures, and it's a travesty really. And the problem is the road network as it is, and that's obviously
the
worldwide.
Problem is behaviour. So if you start to look at the causation factors around people that are killed or seriously injured, it's about 95+% is down to a behaviour. Now that the obvious ones like drinking, drug driving, but also speeding, not looking, the sorts of behavioural things.
Yeah, sure.
And we've done quite a bit of work with the former Cabinet Office nudge team, the Behavioural Insights team, on what are the things that we need to do, particularly around some of those high risk age groups, so things like the 17 to 25-year-old age group. What are the nudges that we need to do to try and get a shift in behaviour? Because you're getting behind something that's a ton plus. They are dangerous, and if you're not behaving in the right way.
But that's inherent. Humans will make mistakes, won't
they?
They
do. And you come back to the digital point around connected and autonomous vehicles. So actually, that takes that behaviour bit out.
Universities are great places to start these sorts of research problems. Digital infrastructure, I could name 4 or 5 people who are working on that right now, and as well as air quality and remanufacturing as well. There's a lot talked about electric vehicles. And I'm quite interested in how we've got quite a lot of cars, and cars could be part of the future, but not in their internal combustion engine style. So we need to basically remanufacture these cars, take them back to as good as new, but with a slightly different way of moving, maybe autonomous kits fitted. A pledge, Rupert. Can I get you to make a pledge? Maybe use the bus more yourself, or something like that.
So I think the biggest pledge I can give you is the work that we're doing through the local transport plan, this 4th local transport plan. I think that is quite exciting. I think that emphasis that I am putting on place and people is really important. That will continue. There's a role for you to play in this as well, so that as you'd have heard today, the various stages of engagement that we're doing on that local transport plan.
27th of November.
So my pledge is to keep that emphasis on the people and place and improving the quality of life for people, providing as best we can that sort of transport reliability, that connectivity for not just the urban areas but the rural areas. I think that is something that sets a broad policy for East Sussex County Council, and I think that is quite exciting. When we get that right,
Yeah.
It feels to me that we're in a better place.
Cool.
I hate to cut you short, but I'm going to have to stop
so
you.
basically, everyone, if you haven't come up with your own pledge, 27th of November, out comes the plan. Have a look at it and put your own thoughts into it. As we go, we've got a room of high density of intelligent, passionate people here. So your views and insights are really going to be worth it. But yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Joanne, are you in the room? Joanne is going to be talking in here during the lunch break. She's just going to give you a quick brief of what she's going to be talking about, and then we can go to have some to lunch.
Thank you. Gosh, it's wonderful, isn't it, to have the dubious honour of being the only thing between a room full of hungry people and lunch when we're already 20 minutes late for lunch. So I'll keep it quick. But hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Yarrow. I work for a company called Human Nature Places. We're based in Lewes, so just down the road. And it's great to be here. Unfortunately, there isn't time in the schedule to talk to you before lunch. So I have a couple of calls to action. One is go and get your sandwiches super quick and then come back here, please, in about 15 minutes if you would like to hear a little bit from me and the team about the work that we're doing. The work that we're doing is focusing on the power of place. So it was great to hear just now that we're going to be seeing a new rethink in the policy coming through in November about people and place when it comes to thinking about how we design the way we live and active travel. I look forward to November, but we don't need to wait till then because I don't think I'm going to show these slides over lunch. If we show them now, I'll have stolen my own thunder. But just in essence, we look at how we can use the way that we design, build, and run places to make sustainable living, every aspect of sustainable living, easy and attractive for as many people as possible. So as we're hearing, we've heard from everyone all morning, the way that we get around is key as an unlock for a better way of life that's within planetary boundaries. So when we think about the power of placemaking on this agenda of how can we shift to active travel, I think that we have something very exciting. So we have our first project down the road in Lewes. It's a brownfield site where we are designing a new neighbourhood that includes about 685 homes, but also workspaces, community facilities, and so on. And one of the real anchors is that it's around active travel. And so join us over lunchtime to hear a bit more about the project. And then this afternoon, we will be running one of the workshops, which is focusing on the power of placemaking to design, build, and run places that make sustainable active travel easy and accessible for many people as possible. So we'd love to share our thinking, but most importantly, we'd love to hear yours and share yours together so that we can continue to crowdsource our plans for that project, but also think about how our shared learnings can then diffuse into places across East Sussex. So it's lunchtime now, but hopefully I'll see some of you back in here in about 15 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, just before we go for lunch, it's great to have you all here, listening to everything that has been told. We also need some feedback from you this afternoon. So there's some breakout groups at 2:25, the school run, connected cycling, whole journeys by bus, train and bike, urban logistics, transport for business and deliveries, transport for tourism and events, placemaking for active travel. Antonia, give us a wave, Antonia. We'll be coming round to your tables this afternoon, trying to get you to sign up to one of those groups so that we can get some feedback from you and then take that forward into a discussion later on. So please go and have some lunch now. Back here at 25 to 2, please.